Hello, my name is Jen Cantwell, and you have found me at my new live stream, The Human Author. I'm known as JB Cantwell in the indie literary world, so that's my pen name if you ever want to look for my books. A couple of reasons. The main reason is that I want to connect better with my readers and show you a little bit about my process as far as drafting, editing, and how I get from point A to point B. The second reason is kind of having to do with some things that are going on in the world right now. There's a lot of technology coming out right now, AI technology. And I'm not against AI. There are a lot of authors now who are starting to use it for fiction drafting. And while I use it for image creation, for blog posts, sometimes for brainstorming, I know other authors who use it for blurb writing in their Amazon descriptions. But for me, using it for drafting is something that I just don't want to do. I want to keep it only human, right from me. So that's really also know where the stories are coming from. So where I'm starting today is dictating the fifth novel in my Light Chaser series called The Warning. If you want to go back and learn some more about these books, you can visit my author website at jbasandboycantwell.com. There's descriptions on there as well, and you can learn how to get free books. So definitely Trees is about a young sorceress who is ousted from her home kingdom. She's pretty green. She doesn't know much about what she's doing, but she's soon told that she is prophesied to be the person to take down a wicked sorcerer who has come into power, a lot of power. So the stories chronicle her travels and building an army and trying to get enough people behind her defeating this guy. So before I start, I want to talk a little bit about my process. And in this industry, generally speaking, there are two types of writers. There are pantsers and plotters. So starting with plotters or outliners. Outliners are people who go through their entire novel, usually, and write down everything that's going to happen in the scene. And that's something that I try to do, not scene by scene, but chapter by chapter. But then there's this other type of author called a pantser. And it's called that because it means you're flying by the seat of your pants. And I started out that way when I first started writing. But I quickly found that if you end up halfway through a novel and you don't have a good idea of where you're going. So I'm a hybrid. I'm someone who does a basic outline and then I ignore it. That happens a lot with me. I do write the outline. Usually about halfway through the book is where I stop. And I try to stick with it and I try to read it every day. But a lot of times I just go in a different direction and follow where the characters are taking me, which results in me having to put myself back on track. But characters tend to have minds of their own. And when that happens, if you stick with me, I'll explain it when it happens and tell you that I just had a new idea. So one other thing about this before I get started is it's not going to happen today, but if I continue this live stream, it'll happen every day, which is that I will go back to the work that I did the day before I start dictating the new session, the work that I did the day before. I will be live streaming for about an hour each day, and usually, or dictating for an hour each day. And usually I can get about half a chapter done, which is usually around 2,000 words for an hour of dictation. So if you don't have time to stick around for that long, or the rate of dictation is too slow, then you can always come back at 9 o'clock Pacific from the day before, which usually takes 10 minutes or so. And then you can follow along the story that way. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am new to this, so here's hoping that the screen sharing actually works. Share screen. There we go. So the way that I dictate is that I actually watch the screen as I write, which is a little strange. A lot of people will take a microphone, a little MP3 player, and a recorder, and they'll walk around and do their dictation. But for me, it's kind of in the middle, where I really like to see the words on the page. But I have found that when I dictate versus typing, the stories end up to be a little. So that's what I'm going to do. And you will see the words come up as I go. I'm not going to watch myself doing this. I'm not going to read comments. And I'm going to pretend that there's nobody here because that's how it usually goes. So I do have a basic outline that I'm working with for this very first chapter. And so I'm going to go ahead and start, turn on my dictation software, say a little prayer. Oh, see, it's already happening. And here I go. I never should have given him that first taste. I guess a microphone might help. I never should have given him that first taste. Period. New line. Colm and I had been traveling for weeks, comma, and his riding skills had multiplied, comma, so much so that I often found myself chasing him. Period. Horse. Cap Talon. Cap Talon, comma. And he was much faster than the mare I had grabbed from the Zemira kingdom. Period. He was ready to go, comma, finally free of the enchanted Cap Forest, period. No one knew how long he'd been trapped in the trees there, comma, possibly decades, comma, even centuries, period. I had been the one to help him escape, comma, and I knew now that I could count on him to help me to fight the wicked sorcerer Torin, period. New line. But now, comma, the last thing I felt like doing was helping him, period. I had left Zemira with 3 canteens of Cap Light. I'd had a lot of Cap Light in my short life, but once I had the opportunity to drink it without abandon, comma, comma, I found that it was difficult to stop, period. Cap Light was powerful enough to bring life back from the brink of death, comma, that no sorcerer could touch, period. New line. But to a sorcerer, comma, great powers amplified by the magical liquid were what awaited the drinker, period. New line. Across the cave where we'd stopped for the night, period. The rain had begun pouring down on us early in the day, comma. And though it seemed that our trip was taking forever, comma, the last thing either of us needed was to be drenched and shivering, period. Colm was eating a hunk of bread he'd brought with him from Zamira. Comma, and he looked at me expectantly, comma, holding out one hand and nodding to my canteen of Cap Light, period. New line. I had subsisted little, but I forgot to start my timer. So now we've got 50 minutes left. Cap Light for several weeks, comma, as it was known to fill one's stomach as if it were the grandest feast one could imagine, period. But so long with nothing to eat had left me strung out, comma, even paranoid, as I held the canteen close to my body, period. New line. Open quote. It's time for a little sip, comma, close quote, Colm said, period. He held out his hand again, comma, and I found myself involuntarily holding the canteen even closer, period. New line. Everyone in that cave was eating but me. I turned to look at the two horses, comma, their muzzles deep in bags of grain, comma, their bodies steaming in from the rain and sweat mixing together, period. I looked back at Colm. Open quote. I've told you, comma, close quote, I said, period. Open quote. We have to save it, period. It's only for emergencies, period, close quote, new line. But he didn't miss a beat, period, open quote. You've gone through an entire can't we left, period. How is it, comma, if it is so important, comma, that you are in need of it, question mark. You've had so much, period. New line. Nope. Close quote. New line. I unwilling to tell him that I knew his words were true, period. New line. Open quote. I have ... injuries, comma, close quote, I said, period. Open quote. You know that, period, close quote. New line, quote. Injuries, question mark, close quote. He said, period. Open quote. You should have been healed of your injuries weeks ago, period. Come on now, comma, you should share, period, close quote. New line. He held out a handful of bread to me, comma, then indicated with the cap light, period. Finally, comma, I relented, comma, not having a good excuse, comma, for he was right, period. I'd taken most of it for myself, period. I'd become strung out on the stuff, comma, and I knew deep down that I would have to stop drinking it soon, period. New line. It's the only way you'll beat Torin, period. New line. Sure if this part was true or not, period. All I knew was the wondrous feeling that drinking it, comma, gulping it down, comma, gave me, period. I'd found power in places I'd never felt before, period. And my own wicked ability to possess others, period. I couldn't deny it, period. Semicolon. I had come to rely on it too much, period. New line. But that didn't stop me from taking ownership, period. New line. One sip, comma, close quote, I said, period. With much regret, I held out the canteen, comma, but I did not take his offering of bread in return, period. Instead, comma, as he brought the canteen to his lips, comma, I watched him like a hawk, making sure he didn't take too much, period. New line. I understood the effect that cap light could have on a man, comma, even one without magic, period. But the truth was, comma, comma, hard won. New line, quote, not too much, comma, close quote, I said. Period, new line. He glanced at me, comma, then took 2 large gulps, period. New line, open quote. Will that do? Question mark. Close quote. He handed the canteen back over to me, period. I grabbed it quickly, comma, putting the stopper back in and putting it into my bag with the other canteen, period. New line. Open quote. You've had enough, comma, close quote, I said, period. I glared at him, comma, watching as his face broke into a smile with the introduction of more cap light into his system, period. New line, open quote. You guard that like a drunk guarding wine, quote, he said, period. New line. Ouch, period. That might have hurt at some other time in my life, comma, some younger time before I get to the liquid magic, period. But now I didn't care if his words were true, semicolon. The farther we rode away from Zamira, comma, the more protective I was over my stash, period. New line. And impatient I became when dealing with Colm, period. In my dark hours, comma, I imagined him to be a fool, comma, a stupid man who'd allowed himself to be entranced by the I imagined him walking into that forest, comma, and though I knew the song the trees sang was nearly impossible to resist, comma, the truth of that had evaded me more and more. The Fred. New line. I stood up, comma, lunch, no. Throw over one shoulder, comma, unwilling to allow him to be alone with it, period. New line, open quote. Where are you going? Question mark, close quote, he asked, period. Open quote. It's pouring out there, period, close quote, new line. He wasn't wrong, comma. But I needed to get myself away from him, period. I needed to keep the cap light safe, period. I walked to the entrance of the cave, comma, looking out over the rolling hills below, period. We'd found ourselves in the foot I wasn't familiar with, period. I'd come to the west side of our lands using a different route, period. Now, comma, I found that I wasn't lost, comma, but wasn't exactly on track, comma, either, period. Open quote. You should come back by the fire, comma, close quote, he said, comma, picking up the piece of bread that had dropped to the stone floor, period. And shoving it into his mouth, comma, a foolish smile on his face, period. You say that cap light is important. Comma. And yet you drink it like water, period. You don't need to protect it from me, semicolon. If you want it, take it, period. But understand that when you tell me how important it is, comma, I don't believe you, period. Why would you drink it, comma, so much of it, comma, if it was one of the only things we could use to defeat Torin, question mark, close quote. Knew another step out of the cave, comma, letting the rain drip down upon my face, period. I wanted to leave, comma, wanted my horse, comma, cap glory, comma, to take me away from this place, comma, to take me somewhere I could be alone, period. It seemed like years ago I'd been told of the prophecy, comma, a secret by the cap keepers, comma, great animals who guarded pools of cap light, period. I hadn't wanted to believe it then, comma, and I didn't want to believe it now, period. New line. I took another step, period. New line. I wondered what Colm would do if I were to simply walk away, period. Would he follow after me, comma, maybe grabbing the horses for good measure, question mark. New line. It was there, comma, as I stood and feeling it drip down the back of my neck, comma, that I made a most dangerous decision, period. Colm had learned to ride, comma, it was true, comma, but I had more experience than he did, period. Perhaps I could take Cap glory without him even knowing. I looked at the sky, comma, wishing that it was dark already, period. But not yet, period. New line. Open quote. I'm going for a walk, comma, close quote, I said, period. In this weather, question mark, close quote, he asked, period, open line. Open quote. It'll freeze out there, period, comma, and we just got dry, period, close quote, new line. I looked back at him, comma, and tried to smile, period. Or it looked more like a grimace, period, new line, open quote. I won't be long, period. Stay here with the horses, comma, will you, question mark, close quote, new line. He looked at me thoughtfully for several long moments, comma, then finally nodded, period, new line. I turned away from him and walked out of the cave and down the hill, period. He was right, comma. I was about, but I found a trail away from him, comma. And soon I was clear, comma, out of sight from the cave, period. I took out the canteen from my bag and tipped it back, comma, drinking greedily, comma, new line. When I came up for air, comma, my plan was beginning to solidify in my mind, period. I would wait until he was asleep, comma, then take both horses. Comma, unable to catch up, period. Of course, comma, he knew where we were going, semicolon. I'd told the others in my party several weeks earlier that I would meet them in the Cap Forest, period. I'd said that we would come together there, back home, comma, back to my own kingdom, comma, Cap Eagle View, period. New line. I heard a cracking branch and stood up from my hiding place, comma, whipping around, comma, suddenly defensive, period. New line. But there was nothing there, period. I took measured breaths, period. I had to keep it together, period. Otherwise, comma, I would be lost, period. The cap light would be lost, comma. And in that moment, comma, it seemed that was the most important point, period. New line. Finally, comma, when I'd drained the canteen of half its cap, I stoppered it and put it back into my bag, period. Colm was right, semicolon. It was freezing out in the rain, period. I would have to night, comma, for my need to escape was suddenly stronger than any other obligation I had to keep, period. New line. I walked back up the hill, comma, then dropped my bag at the entrance of the cave, across from him, comma, holding my hands out over the magical fire I'd set hours before, period. The rain dripped from my tunic, comma, and I knew it would take a while before I was dry again, period. New line, open quote. What did you do out there? Question mark, close, open quote. Did you drink more? Question mark, close quote, new line. I shrugged, period. Open quote. I don't answer to you, comma, close quote, I said, period. It was true, comma, and now that we were so far away from Zamira, comma, I regretted having brought him at all, period. Some part of me, comma, some kinder part of me, comma, had wanted him along for the ride, period. I'd determined that he would be of assistance, comma, that he could tell his story to my friends once we met up with them again, period. New line. Enya, comma, the sorceress who'd helped free so siren song of the trees back in Zamira, comma, would certainly meet us, comma, too, period. I wondered what her story would be like, period. I'd been hiding my desire for cap light from everyone, comma, even her, period. But I wondered now if she would see right through me, period. New line. I laid back onto the rock, comma, brushing out my hair behind me so that it would dry in the warmth of the cave, period. I closed my eyes, comma, feigning tiredness, period. I listened, making sure that Colm stayed where he was, period. That he didn't make a move, period. New line. He didn't, comma, not as far as I could tell, period. I knew that I would need rest if I were going to be able to escape. I allowed my breathing to even out, comma, and despite the danger, comma, I allowed my body to relax, period. I felt certain that happened, comma, if he moved 1 inch from where he sat, period. New line. So with that, comma, I began to fall, the lightest of sleep. Trusting that he would do the same, period. New line. Page break, period. But he didn't do the same, period. I woke, comma, staring over the fire, comma, expecting to see him there, comma, sleeping like me, period. New line. He wasn't there, period. And as I looked around, I realized he wasn't there at all, period. Period. I ran to the entrance to the cave, looking out at the surrounding countryside once more, noting that the rain had stopped, period. I heard a noise from behind, and I found my horse with her head raised high, ears pointing in the direction towards me, period. Her munching had stopped, and she walked towards me, stopping 6 feet away, period. She eyeballed me, and I realized she was shaking, period. New line. Was she, a horse? Undo. Mark. Could it be that the beautiful mare, not mare, had had enough of me? New line. I turned away and scanned the land, panic beginning to set in, period. And suddenly, what must have happened, period. I whipped around and looked down at the floor of the cave, but I found nothing there, period. Where my traveling pack had been, put down, now there was nothing but dirt and rocks left behind, period. New line. My breathing began coming in gasps, and I couldn't believe how stupid I'd been, period. I'd trusted that fool, comma. Fool. I'd believed him that he would help me on this journey. New line. I'd been very wrong, period. New line. I grabbed Cap Glory's reins. And threw them over her neck, period. I viciously snapped at the bit in her mouth, comma, forcing her out of the cave, comma, period. A moment later, comma, I was mounted up, kicking her ruthlessly in the sides, comma, urging her away, period. I had to get to higher ground, comma, had to figure out what had happened to my traveling companion, period. New line. The thief, period. I suddenly imagined myself squaring off with him, period. He was a man, comma, much taller than I was, comma, but he didn't have a lick of magic in his body, period. New line. Period. New line. I gritted my teeth, period. Urging the horse up the hill, comma, period. So a quick little note. I keep putting in a page break, which is like a scene break, but I changed my mind. Like I said, I don't always follow my outline. So here's a new one. But I didn't see him, comma, not at first, period. As I made my way up to the top of the foothills, comma, I scanned, comma, searching in every direction, period. And then, comma, I could feel my body filling with a dark desire, comma, coming to terms with my period. I'd only ever used my power to help others, even when I'd realized that my greatest skill was to possess, period. I'd been told by my friend, Connell, that what I was doing was evil, period. I remember his eyes on me, accusing, period. It didn't matter to him that I had helped him regain his powers after one of Torin's sons from him, period. New line. But he hadn't cared, period. New line. I thought of everyone waiting for me in the Cap Forest. And for the first time, in a long time, I considered leaving permanently, period. New line. I turned my head, pulling the horse around to the right, and then, suddenly, there he was, period. He was riding at a gallop up to the top of the foothills, the mountains looming ahead of him, period. New line. I kicked Cap Glory and raced after him, period. Okay, so it hasn't been quite an hour, but it's very close to having been an hour. And I think that this is a good place to stop. I hope that you enjoyed this. Interested in learning about what I'm doing here and learning about the human author, go to thehumanauthor.com. You can also support me on there. I have a subscription where you can get the first 4 books in this series. And it's pretty cool, actually. So check it out. Look at some blog posts. I am going to be blogging at least a couple times a week. So I will be back tomorrow at 9, and I will read through this. I got a lot done. I'm feeling pretty good. Anyways, thank you for joining. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye.